In my last video, I talked about one of Thomas Aquinas' arguments for the existence of God. And today I'm going to be talking about another one, Aquinas' argument from contingency. Now, this word contingency isn't something we use a lot, so I want to make sure we get down exactly what it means before we begin. When Aquinas talks about contingency and contingent things, he's talking about things which can come into existence and can come out of existence. The contingency of the thing is its ability to begin to exist and to stop existing. Take me, for example. At one point, I didn't exist. And at another point, I'm going to stop existing. I'm contingent. Or take this YouTube channel. At one point, it didn't exist. And now it does exist. And at some point way down in the future, it probably won't exist, which is why you should subscribe right now while it still does. This YouTube channel is contingent. Or take the dinosaurs. There was a time when the dinosaurs didn't exist. And then there was a time when the dinosaurs did exist. And then the asteroid happened, and now there's a time where the dinosaurs don't exist. And who knows, 200 years from now, when Jurassic Park happens, the dinosaurs might start to exist again. And then we wouldn't exist. See how this works? If anything has the ability to have times when it does exist and times when it doesn't exist, that thing is contingent. Now, what Aquinas realizes is that it's impossible for everything that exists to be contingent. And the easiest way to show this is with an illustration. Imagine this line is me. There's this time when I don't exist, then there's time when I do exist, and then eventually there's going to be time when I don't exist. Or the dinosaurs. There's this time when they do exist, asteroid, time when they don't exist, Jurassic Park, do exist. Or the YouTube channel. Time when it doesn't exist, time when it does exist, then I forget to post a video, and then it doesn't exist, then it does exist again, and then it doesn't, and it does. It kind of goes in and out of existence. For all these things, there's times when they do exist and times when they don't exist. And that's true of every single contingent thing. So the thing about contingent things is there's always going to be times when they do exist and times where they don't exist. All contingent things. But these times, you might notice, where the things don't exist, they can overlap. I mean, this guy doesn't exist here, that kind of overlaps with that guy not existing there. This guy not existing there overlaps with that guy not existing there. So here's the question. Is it ever possible for there to be a time when all the times where all these contingent things don't exist overlap? And Aquinas says, given an infinite amount of time, that's just not possible. It's absolutely going to happen. Because if you have an infinite amount of time and you have all these things that at some points don't exist and at some points do exist, then eventually you're going to have this situation where all of these things have their times to not exist at the same time, and nothing's going to exist. But Aquinas notices that if you ever have this time where nothing exists, then nothing could ever exist again. Why? Well, because nothing can come from nothing. So if you have this time where nothing exists, you can't get anything else. And what Aquinas does is he applies this idea that you can't have a world of all contingent things and an infinite amount of time to the past. Because if you had an infinite amount of time in the past and the world was entirely made up of contingent things, then you're guaranteed to have had at some moment a point in time when nothing existed. And if there was a point of time in the past when nothing existed, then there could not be anything right now because nothing can come from nothing. But that's absurd because there are things right now. Therefore, we either have to say that, one, there hasn't been an infinite past, or two, the world is not made up entirely of contingent things. Now, if we say the first option, that there hasn't been an infinite past, then that leads towards another argument for God, the Kalam cosmological argument, which states that if the world began to exist, anything that begins to exist must have a cause, therefore the world must have a cause outside of it, and that must be God. But Aquinas isn't interested in that argument. He's interested in that other option, that the world can't be made up of entirely contingent things. And he says that there must be at least some things that are necessary. And by necessary, he means not contingent, not able to come into being and come out of being. And notice I said some things, because for Aquinas, it is possible, at least in theory, for more than one thing to have a kind of necessity about it. He thinks, for example, that the angels are necessary, in a sense. But ultimately, he thinks that anything that's necessary needs to ultimately depend on some prior necessity. And the reason is this. What makes contingent things contingent is that they're made up of parts. Anything that's made up of parts can come into being and come out of being, because parts can be combined and taken apart. So, if anything is going to be truly substantially necessary, it has to not have any parts. But there could only be one thing that doesn't have parts, because in order for there to be more than two things, just in general, more than two of a kind of thing, there has to be one part that one of them has that another one doesn't. And if something doesn't have parts, then there couldn't be any parts that separated it from another kind of thing like that. So there can only be one thing that doesn't have parts. That means there can only be one thing that's truly substantially necessary. And when we think about what it means for a thing not to have parts, we also realize that that means it can't have the two different parts that are in us, essence and existence. See my previous video on that one. So if this thing doesn't have a distinction between its essence and existence, then it's the same ultimate source of everything, this all-good, all-knowing, all-powerful source of everything that Aquinas has arrived at in his previous argument. And that thing is God.